when you have 6 weeks to pre-produce a movie, which is about what we had, you have to find people who are going to be able to deliver unsupervised, because you just don't have time to be there. Not that, I would have had much to add to the makeup effects in this movie, but we talked about the just the vibe of it, what it should feel like. I think I'd maybe seen one Nine Inch Nails video, so we were kind of exploring the same kind of territory as what was happening in the early 90s. But this was really about hiring a guy who's undoubtedly just a major fucking genius and giving him as much money as you could possibly swindle out of Bob Shea and letting him go mad. And that's what he did. The actor who plays Sloth is a guy named Michael McKay. When we were casting, we were looking for somebody who was like 90 pounds. And he came in, I think he was like 96 pounds or something when he came in to talk about. And he, of course, his resume is like, he played the zombie in this, he played the skeleton in this other movie. And you wanted somebody who'd done that kind of stuff, because he's going to be in makeup for 10 hours before he shows up. And then he's got to be put into like a refrigerated van and like brought from the valley to downtown LA, and then taken up on a stretcher and dropped into the thing, and then remade up, and then we're ready to shoot him. But he came in, and I sort of flippantly said to him, I said, Mike, if you can lose 10 pounds, you got the job. And he lost weight. And when I showed up, there he was with all his makeup on and his teeth in and everything. And he goes, I lost 6 pounds. And I was like horrified that anybody would take me seriously, because I thought that he would see it as an obvious jest. But anyway, I think that whole section is really a tribute to Botine Productions.
My name is Peter Sorrell, and I am what they call a unit photographer, or a still photographer. My usual work, of course, is 75% color, and it involves the actors. Movies publicity and advertising dictates that is what I have to do. I start the film, I first read the script, and when I read the script, I know immediately which half a dozen scenes or so are the key scenes in the film, which absolutely have to be covered really well. It doesn't mean that I won't cover the others, because many times accidentally something happens in a visual sense, but dramatically speaking, you have to do those scenes which will enable the production company to the publicity arm of the company to market the film. The quality of the images, the film is different, not quite so grainy as motion picture film. If you want to blow up a still frame from a movie, it will blow up to not really a size of a poster, because it would be grain size of your fingers. It wouldn't look very good. Whereas a still photographer has the ability to pick a certain kind of film emulsion, which will enable him to have a frame which is really sharp. The grain is sharp, and therefore it will blow up. What we do started out in the early 1920s, when to do a still shot you had a large camera, and an assistant, and everything stopped and everybody posed, and this industry was based on that the still photographer is around the camera crew and around the actors, and he works usually when the shot is finished, he comes in. By the 1950s, this changed into try to shoot while they are rehearsing or while they're shooting, because we can't take that much time as it was possible before. All the rest, what I do, when you say, you're an artist, it's very nice to think so. However, many times the artistic pictures would be totally unusable for their purposes. And I don't mean this as a judgment for any company. It's the reality of what I like to do, maybe. Is a picture of an empty set or of a shadow, and many times these pictures are totally useless. So you do this on your own time after you've done the material, what you have to, why they hired you. That is why you're there, and first you perform, then you play. It was one of the most interesting projects for many reasons. One was that it was an intelligent script, which made this terribly gruesome story visually and dramatically acceptable, I think, to the audience. The audience did not leave the movie theater gasping and throwing up, because we never showed the bodies. We showed very little of it. We never showed the actual act of violence, but only the outcome and the aftermath. So I really appreciated that. It was intelligent. I personally would much rather shoot during the actual performance, because actors give their all while they're doing it. And as much as they are they say or then they mean that they will do it again for you, it's a little different. When you do it for a still camera, it's just a photograph, it's not important. When you do it for the film, you act. When you do it for a still, some actors act and some actors sort of sleep through it or smile pleasantly, and that's not what we need. I mean, the drama is gone.
Tus trailers, visita mi canal.
All these photographs, I had no idea what I was up for until I actually looked at the real thing, what the police department actually had. They're pretty gritty, very, very contrasty black and white pictures. This image I liked a lot, which in a way it also gave some of his psyche of this dismemberment of a little, I think it was a little child, because he tore up the picture and then he left this piece of head and another piece of his body, 6 inches away on the wall. Shot all with flash. The police department doesn't believe in available light. It's more in the details and minutiae of a crime scene. Well, the existence of a photographer is sort of pretty solitary. You're always outside looking in. Now, John Doe's apartment, what we are looking through now, was built on a soundstage by Otto Max, who, as far as I'm concerned, a truly wonderful artist, because of the little creations he really went into the man's psyche in such detail that it was amazing. In one room, he set up like what seemed like a little museum of horrors, of images about other people's murders, other crime scenes, like glorifying it in such a way that it was actually artistic. Well, these are the stills, the crime photos on the Gluttony set. David wanted to be sure that we show immediately in the pictures that this man just ate, and there's this tons of cans and bags of food all over the kitchen. I love this picture of the back of the man's head. You don't know if he's dead or alive, but by seeing these rolls of fat even on the back of his head, you get the message. The side view, well, there you see the whole thing. We had amazing makeup artists. Slaughter was like a combination of images which showed so much degradation that you wondered how could a human being be put through that and survive, 5 minutes. And this was truly one of probably the sickest of the murders for me to photograph the aftermath. Luckily, the body was removed. This is downtown Los Angeles, a real apartment where nobody lived for decades, I think. And it was just the filthiest thing. These are on the set of Greed. And these photos at this point just show that this is a very wealthy man because of the marvelous artwork in his office. You had the sense that she did not want to be seen like this ever, because she was a beautiful model, and she rather died. That was quite a comment. It's not as upsetting, at least not to me, maybe because it's black and white, than what I imagined this could have looked in the real scene, in the real crime scene. And also what the police told me, that the stench, the smells are so terrible that luckily none of that I had to put up with.
I am Melody McDaniel. I was responsible for doing John Doe's photography for the movie Seven. Besides taking the pictures, I was responsible for making the pictures kind of slightly off or imperfected. And I was even asked in other departments, in the art department, they were impressed with the way I was bleaching out my Polaroids, scratching on the negatives, stepping on them, and doing whatever just to make it look just to give it some texture. For the gluttony photographs, I brought this old land camera in because I was imagining that John Doe was somewhat of an amateur photographer, so I visualized him just sort of going into a thrift store or secondhand store and buying a cheap camera that is like an old-fashioned camera and just kind of making it work. I brought in my land camera that has a lot of light leaks in it, holes in it, so it's not perfect. So with the gluttony pictures, I went in and made things a little bit more abstract. That's what I wanted. I knew that I wanted them to look different than the crime scene type of photography, which is very Ouija-esque, flash, hard flash, very contrasty, where my pictures, I wanted them to feel a little blurry. I wanted them to see a little scratchy and have like imperfections on them, and being through the kind of camera, which was an old land camera, would help me give that effect, like even the lens being a little slightly soft, so nothing was really sharp. Some things were one part of the frame would be in focus and the other part would, half wouldn't, and I thought that might be an interesting way for John Doe to take his photographs. I use a lot of natural light. I'm untechnical. I don't use a lot of technical techniques to make my work, my images happen. I tend to just do a lot of guessing, and things just happen, and I get a lot of interesting mistakes that'll come up that I may not be able to recreate, but sometimes it works for the advantage and sometimes not. This particular film I was using is called 665 Polaroid film, and it's black and white, and it comes with a negative, which is the only, I think, Polaroid film that comes with a negative. So it lets you alter. The Polaroid film comes with a coater. If you don't coat the picture, it'll fade. It'll start to fade. So instead of coating them immediately, I just let them sit, and I let them kind of, even if I had my photo assistants take them outside of the studio and bake them in the sun, so they start bleaching out. And then I even sometimes would take that after bleaching them. I'd pick up the photograph, stick it back onto the negative, and so to create this weird texture. I just was very messy with them, so it was very interesting. And I went and presented this to David just to make sure I was I was on the right track. If this was something interesting to him, and he loved it. He goes, even push it more, make them more distorted, make it so even if you barely even have an image on one of the Polaroids. So I gave him a variety of that, and I noticed that with the Gluttony, I focused on my Polaroid camera, and also I did use a 4x5 land camera, because I used, again, they had a Type 55 film for the 4x5 camera, which I can do the same thing with the Polaroid. Just visually, for some reason, I just thought it was just a feeling I got, and I wanted, being that I also, as a photographer, I use 3 or 4 different cameras depending on the type of story I'm about to reveal. I think each camera can tell a story. Sometimes one, just it's a feeling I got. And for Gluttony, I just thought Polaroid land camera was perfect, and also a 4x5 land camera. Now for Greed, 35 millimeter. That was it. And what I did was, in the printing, in order to make the 35 feel a little bit, to show a lot of imperfections on that, I definitely had to tweak it in the printing. And instead of spotting the prints, there was a lot of dust in the darkroom, and I just kind of let it go. I just let it happen, just so it didn't look so perfect and clean. Because John Doe didn't strike me as even though he seemed like an intelligent guy, I didn't feel that he would want to go back and spot his prints to make sure it was perfect. Again, not being experienced, I kind of walked in feeling a little, I shouldn't say a lot unsure of what I was going to do, but I just went with what I thought would be the best. And I started to set up as I had to pretend like I had to kind of get into John Doe's head, as if what are the steps he would take to get through to this, the lawyer I think I was supposed to kill through with the camera. With the Greed photographs, I was working with the actor, David, in this case, again, it was very vague. He kind of didn't give me too much information. He wanted me to go in there and just sort of make things happen however I saw it. I just think it's just interesting when you have your photographs are telling a story, but they happen to be on a piece of paper as you're turning the page, or, you know. I actually saw a book that was called A Paper Story, and I thought, or A Paper Movie. And I thought that was just so beautifully put for somebody who likes to tell stories with their photography, and it's almost so close to showing a film, showing your movie, showing your pictures in a cinematic way, but it's still, you know, not really moving, or it's moving at the pace you want it to move when you're turning the page. I don't know if that makes any sense. I was first a fly on the wall spying on him, so I had a Nikon 35mm camera with a wide lens, just so it felt like I was kind of distant. And then I started with a wide lens, so I was kind of far away. And then as I wanted to get closer to him, I switched lenses, you know, like a 50 and then 85 to 105. And as those lenses changed, I was getting more and closer to killing him. Sorry, I was going to say the victim. And I remember just being so excited because I actually particularly like to take pictures of dark things, and when I say dark, not just like literally the color, you know, dark like that. I just like things that are just unusual or not common, or things that, like objects and also people that are just outcasts of society. I guess in that sense, for some reason, I'm attracted to that. I noticed that I like telling stories with photographs, and I think it's also a way of eventually wanting to move into filmmaking and moving pictures. Gluttony was extremely abstract. Greed was more of a narrative, and with lust, it was a combination of both, where I was trying to make a little narrative by interchanging lenses to get closer to her, and also I wanted things to feel a little dreamy and abstract, so I shot things out of focus. The composition and the cropping was just way off, just so it looked spontaneous and just crazed for some reason. I just imagined John Doe just running around trying to keep up with her and without revealing himself. So I turned the lust into more like a narrative along with a visual abstract with the photography. I work with assistants, sometimes a couple, sometimes in the case with SE7EN, I had 3 assistants, and they helped me with the process by manipulating the photographs, the Polaroids, and also the exposure, helping me scratch the negatives. They would take the film outside and step on it. They'd even open up the camera backs to let light in to give an effect of very amateur photography. And so within my process, it's really helpful to have a team of people to help my art. And my team was Cecil Cole, Eric Coleman, and Greg Scafidi.
I'm Clive Piercy, the art director on the project for the notebooks, John Doe's notebooks.
And I'm John Sable, the designer for the books.
And we're going to explain a little bit how the process of how we work together on this project and how we put the books together, and some of the references and ideas that came to bear in bringing these things to life. We got a call from Arthur Max's office to design the John Doe notebooks, and I met with Arthur and David, and they outlined what they wanted. They'd had some work done before, and nobody was happy with it. They felt it was too kind of decorative, and they really had a specific look that they were after. They felt that we could do it. So we talked about references to kind of the Starn twins and Robert Frank and kind of the whole kind of distant Witkin and all of those things. So they knew what they wanted, and they asked me to go away and do some ideas. And the thing they talked mostly about was the kind of it was the personality of his handwriting. They wanted this kind of obsessive quality to the handwriting. So I knew I wasn't able to do that, but I thought that I knew what they wanted. So I'd known John for a long time, and John has this amazing kind of calligraphic hand, and so I called him up, and he came in and just kind of took over. Yeah. And he immediately got this handwriting just nailed, and all of a sudden it started to the visual side of it took a backseat to this kind of incredibly perverted stream of consciousness, anal handwriting that this guy had to have. And they sent over this copy that John had to handwrite, it was vitriolic. Yes. Well, I'd leave John alone for hours at the office. I'd just see him there scrawling away at this stuff,
painful.
Head down, he got so into it. I mean, you couldn't come up to him and speak to him. His head was down. He was just churning this stuff out.
It was painful.
Yeah, it was.
The funniest, there was a lot of funny things that happened, but one of the funniest things that happened was I would go to Kinko's and have these things, I'd take these photographs that I found that had like a woman with a cloth, it was like she was dead and she had cloth in her mouth and she was drowned and bloated. I would take these really grotesque images of murder and mayhem, and I'd go to this Kinko's that was very, down in Torrance. It was a real, peaceful little place. Yeah. And I would say, I want these images put onto this plastic film. Remember the plastic film, so we could overlay these things, and we'd tape it. And after we got those, we would tape the things with this yellow tape that we found, and that looked like it was like sexual. It was like after sex, it was sticky and there was goo, and it was just like it was like sheets, man. It was like God, you could just smell this stuff.
And the people at Kinko's they were just
freaking out. Yeah. They didn't know what I did and what I was. And
They used to
you know.
real estate flyers, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And they wanted, and these kids would look at this stuff in their little blue aprons, and they'd go, "Oh fuck, you know, what's this guy?" Look at each top of the page, and they're all titled with lust or you know, envy or whatever. And you know, that we tried to alternate. Each page would have something happening that would be different. Little notations on the side, photographs that would be placed in specific places that would be maybe overlaid over copy, and the transparency would actually go over the top. Then they had, you know, a yellow piece of tape that would run, and each corner would be try to make it as meticulous as we could get it on the tape. We'd cut it so it'll look like that. I think that stuff is on the edge of, you know, it's smut, but it's safe pornography. There's a sexual kind of tension there. Or it's like bad art or popular art.
If there's a way of this, John Doe wasn't kinky in a normal way. He was even kinkier than the kinky guys, in a kind of straight way. I don't have another way of putting that, but I definitely felt that way. That we couldn't use sexy pornographic pictures. He got turned on by mutilated limbs and, you know, decapitated people and people whose fingers had been sawn off. That to me is what he found sexual.
All the photographs that we kind of picked, the photographs would be, you know, a person that would be dying or someone that was tied up, almost like an S&M photograph.
One day he says, I found this place somewhere down by you in Manhattan Beach or something, some old stationer's store that had tape and that hadn't been touched since the 1950s. So he brought in all this he found this amazing archive of old glassine envelopes and paper clips and stuff that was like, and then we were like, God, this is amazing. We don't even have to age them of this stuff.
Each one's taped on the outside of the edge, the rib of the binding on the outside. Each one of those books had a different library kind of tape that was color coded, and so if it was a green, this special kind of old green tape that we found, that would be like, you know, it could be envy or it could be lust or, you know, one of the 7 sins. And then
we both thought that these books, these composition books, should be they should be so anal that the guy actually made them
again
himself.
and sewn them again.
He sewed them up himself. That was part of the process. So John hand sewed all this stuff, put them in the oven, baked these things so they went all kind of decrepit and old. Yeah. When they came out, they were gorgeous.
Each book was hand stitched with either a special like laundry thread or a suture, and we actually did them with operating needles because they were the perfect little band to go in and working around all surgical kind of stuff. The mentality of the whole thing was to keep it kind of scientific and surgical. And then, you know, Clive kept saying, you got to make it more real. He kept pushing me because he was getting pushed to go that way. And I was getting really fed up, and you know, I'd keep going back through these files, and I'd find, you know, stuff that the Crips wrote to my father in prison, and I learned the whole way they did stuff. And then there was this one file that the guy committed suicide, and there was a letter in there, the actual suicide letter, and I thought, I put it in one, and the guy killed himself. And Clive looked at this letter and he goes, wow, how did you write this thing? And I said, it's real. And he goes, what? It's real? I go, the guy's dead. And there were tears on the letter, and it was the way he wrote it.
And it was all misspelled, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, it was terrible.
Terrible. He couldn't even spell happy.
No one could ever do it.
It was like happy was H-A-P-Y or something. It was unbelievable.
And we stuck that in.
And it was folded, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was folded, and we said, okay, leave it like that.
Oh.
And then we said, let people discover it. When they go through it, let these people have to deal. Let the filmmakers, for pushing us this far, let them have to deal with, is this real or not, or how they did it.
The Gluttony set was based on actual police crime scene photos, which had to do with a real case of suicide. And the quality of that actual crime scene is what I try to achieve here in this studio set that we built as if the room had been partitioned and extended and remodeled over and over again by a whole procession of occupants previously, so that you got a sense of layering, and that the age that had built up in terms of the thickness of paint and the accumulation of grease visually reflected the amount of prehistory, and perhaps suggested that there may have been other crimes or events taking place here. It had a kind of a thickness of foreboding that you could read from the caking of the grease on the windows. It was just the neglect and the obsession of the character that you found who occupied these spaces that was just written on the walls. For the greed murder scene, we made it an elegant office, and an elegant office is not a lot you can do with the atmosphere of it. I mean, I could talk about what interested me in the design of that was the articulation of the ceiling beams and the finishes of the wood veneer and the detail of the doors, but it's not very powerful compared to a lot of the other design elements. What was interesting was, recreating the composite of that set with the approach from the side door and the back spaces rather than the normal kind of front door entry where you're coming in. And that was really David's idea. That's how he wanted to shoot it, and to accommodate that kind of rear entry, we ended up deciding to build it because we could never find anything that had that physical layout in an existing location. Well, you have in the police station and the library a reflection of the municipal control, the authorities, the established order. It participates also in design elements that have to do with period films, film noirs, particularly in the police station. And we wanted to give them a sense of the precedent of everything that went before in the life of this city. It's a city of, it has a kind of history to it, whereas all the murder scenes and the crime scenes were driven, the design of them was driven by the characters themselves, and they're trying to represent their sins visually in those rooms. There was a big fight with the studio to pay for all that construction. I just said, why don't you just go to an existing location library, like at UCLA or Beverly Hills Library. But they're all very modern and very bright, and you couldn't control them as easily, and they just didn't have the atmosphere. It just wouldn't work anywhere else. It's like, how could you possibly think about doing it somewhere else? Except maybe the New York Public Library in Manhattan, which I kept pushing for. As I thought, well, they'd be so happy not to have to go to New York to do it. They'd be thrilled just to build it here. In certain cases, the rooms were used as offices, but we were using them as residences, and I think the confusion of that helps to kind of also wrong foot the viewer to the point where you don't really know where you are, and the danger that you sense from the SWAT team not knowing what's through the next door is amplified because it's not a typical place to live. You're not really sure what kind of a place this is because you're seeing the kind of light fixtures and accessories you associate with office building, but the furniture is residential and domestic, so you're not quite sure what's going on here. What we're saying is that this is an abandoned office building that's occupied by crackheads, and they live there, but you don't know that that's what's happening until you get further. I think the design of the interiors is always tailored to the victims, and that the people inhabiting the spaces are placed according to their position in the world we're living in, their place in society. I don't think everyone lives equally. It's a diverse society, and that's part of the problem. There's the haves and the have-nots. The Red Cross idea came from a search for trying to illuminate the environment of John Doe's apartment using a mixture of all kinds of different light sources. I decided that because we couldn't use daylight, I would use every other kind of source I could find. And so if you look, there are fluorescents, there are incandescents, there are neons. So it just became logical to have a neon, and when I considered, what the neon should be, it just seemed to me that a man like him should have a neon cross. Well, the approach to the interior is very cave-like, and as you move through it, you feel like you're descending into a basement world, particularly since we painted all the windows black. There's daylight outside, but we've closed it off, so you're now subterranean. The only light that exists is either artificial, a red neon cross, or a fluorescent tube. But there are also scratchings on the windows of various obsessive symbols of various kinds, of graffiti, John Doe's graffiti, that leak little chinks of light into an otherwise a dark, lightless world, a world with only darkness. We try to achieve in Lust the seediest, most indulgent, corrupt environment we could possibly muster, the lowest of the low. It involved working in an existing nightclub basement and adding wall partitions and creating a kind of another labyrinth. The approach to the palette of these scenes is to keep color out of it as much as possible, so that the red of the bloodstain reads as really the only color element in an otherwise sepia-toned world. Spoon-feeding the audience enough to keep their attention, letting the story flow from room to room, from clue to clue, and giving you those hints. You're, on the trail with the detectives. We try to give that flavor of, the importance of the common object. Some are more important than others, and some are more featured than others, but they all tend to communicate something, and they're thought about. Even the smallest detail, there's an idea to it, and a logic to it, and the world is constructed around that idea.